You should have stayed off this train. Now it's too late.
1933. Dutch Schultz sent 12 of his best killers to eliminate Bumpy Johnson in a cotton club basement. One unarmed man, 12 professional assassins, no witnesses, no escape route. But when the sun rose that Valentine's Day morning, something impossible happened that made Dutch Schultz go pale. What did Bumpy Johnson do in that basement that changed Harlem forever? To understand how it all led here, we goes back to where it truly began. Harlem, 1933. The Depression hit hard everywhere, but in Harlem it hit like a fist to the throat. Unemployment wasn't just a number in the newspapers. It was the line of men standing outside the soup kitchen on 125th Street at dawn. It was families doubled up in single rooms because nobody could make rent. It was the sound of banks slamming their doors shut when a black face walked in asking for a loan. Cash was scarce. Hope was scarcer. But Harlem had something the banks didn't understand: the numbers game. An illegal lottery where you could bet a nickel on a 3-digit number. If you hit, you won $50. For people making $7 a week, that nickel wasn't gambling. It was survival. It was paying the electric bill. It was keeping your kids fed for another month. The numbers game became the heartbeat of Harlem. Not because people were greedy, because they were desperate. And when you're desperate, a nickel bet isn't about getting rich. It's about making it to next Tuesday. Every morning, runners collected bets from corner stores, barbershops, speakeasies. Every evening, numbers were drawn. Winners got paid. Losers tried again tomorrow. The system worked because it was organized, disciplined, and because the woman running it understood something most outsiders didn't: control the numbers, control Harlem's breath. But empires don't fall from the outside. They collapse when the foundation cracks. And in 1933, Dutch Schultz's foundation was cracking. Dutch Schultz had been untouchable during Prohibition. A German Jewish mobster from the Bronx who'd built an empire bootlegging liquor when alcohol was illegal. Trucks, warehouses, payoffs to cops and politicians. At his peak, Dutch was pulling in millions. His name alone made people nervous, but Prohibition was ending. Congress was about to repeal the 18th Amendment. Legal liquor meant Dutch's empire was about to become worthless. His lieutenants were getting anxious. Rivals were circling. And Dutch, who'd never backed down from anything, felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not fear of dying. Fear of irrelevance. He needed new territory. Fast. And when he looked south from the Bronx, he saw Harlem. Saw all that cash flowing through the numbers game. Saw a neighborhood full of black folks who in his mind wouldn't put up much of a fight. Dutch made a calculation. Harlem was unprotected. Disorganized. Ripe for takeover. He'd roll in, take control of the numbers, and rebuild his empire before anyone knew what hit them. It was a mistake, because Harlem already had kings. Madame Stephanie St. Clair ran the numbers in Harlem. A Caribbean immigrant who'd arrived with nothing and built an empire through intelligence and discipline. She didn't encourage violence, didn't need to. Her system worked because people trusted it. Bets got paid. Runners didn't skim. Cops who took her money stayed bought. She created order in a neighborhood the city had abandoned. And standing in the corner of her office, always watching, always silent, was her enforcer, Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy wasn't like other muscle. He wasn't a trigger man who solved problems with bullets. He was 27 years old. Educated himself in prison reading Shakespeare and philosophy. He understood something most enforcers didn't. Fear isn't about violence, it's about psychology. When Madame St. Clair's runners got robbed, Bumpy got the money back, sometimes without throwing a punch. When dirty cops tried to shake down black businesses, Bumpy made them disappear. Not their bodies, their careers. Their reputations. He watched more than he spoke, listened more than he acted, and when he did move, it was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The relationship between Madame St. Clair and Bumpy was simple. She represented the system. He protected it. She made the decisions. He made sure those decisions stuck. Total trust. No questions. Bumpy never postured, never needed to prove anything. That made him more dangerous than the loudest man in any room. It was only a matter of time before Dutch's ambition collided with Harlem's reality. January 1933. Dutch didn't come to Harlem himself. That would have been beneath him. Instead, he sent emissaries. 3 men in expensive suits who walked into Madame St. Clair's club on 133rd Street like they owned it. They sat down at her table, ordered drinks without asking permission, then laid out Dutch's offer. Work with us, pay tribute. We'll protect you from other gangs, keep the cops off your back. Light taxes, reasonable terms. Everyone wins. But the words underneath were different. Bow down. Submit. Or get buried. The air in that room went cold. Madame St. Clair listened without interrupting. Then she smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said she'd heard this speech before from men who thought being white and connected made them untouchable. Get out, she said. The emissaries blinked. Nobody told Dutch Schultz's men to leave. Nobody. One of them turned to Bumpy standing in the corner. You want to be smart about this, boy. Bumpy didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. That stare. The one that made men check their life insurance. The one that said without words, I've already decided how you die if you don't walk out of here right now. The emissary stood up, left, reported back to Dutch. The refusal wasn't just business. It was personal. Madame St. Clair had looked at 3 white men representing the most powerful mobster in New York and dismissed them like they were nothing. And Bumpy's silence said something even worse. You're not worth words. When Dutch Schultz heard the report, he didn't explode, didn't smash furniture or scream threats. He went quiet. That was worse. His lieutenants waited, watched. Dutch sat at his desk, staring at nothing, processing what had just happened. He'd been rejected, disrespected, by a black woman and her enforcer. Dutch Schultz, who'd gone to war with Lucky Luciano, who'd killed his own partners when they got greedy, who never ever backed down. He felt something shift inside him. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about power, about proving that nobody said no to Dutch Schultz. Not in the Bronx, not in Manhattan, and damn sure not in Harlem. He made a decision. He didn't need to control Harlem with money. He'd control it with fear. And fear required a message. A public, brutal message that would make everyone else fall in line. Kill Bumpy Johnson. Not quietly. Not quickly. Make it a spectacle. Make it hurt. Let everyone in Harlem know what happens when you reject Dutch Schultz. This wasn't personal. It was strategic. Bumpy was a symbol. Kill the symbol, break the spirit. Dutch started planning immediately. He didn't want thugs. He wanted professionals. Men who'd killed before and would kill again without hesitation. He called in 12 of his best. Tommy, the executioner, Vento, who'd murdered 16 men and always looked them in the eye when he pulled the trigger. Marty, Ice Pick, Delaney, who got his name from his favorite weapon. 10 others whose names even the police didn't know. Each one represented violence, experience, cruelty. The plan was simple. Quiet. Fast. No witnesses. Corner Bumpy somewhere isolated. Overwhelm him with numbers. Kill him. Disappear. Send Harlem a message they'd never forget. Word travels fast in the underworld. Faster than official channels. Faster than police reports. A whisper here. A name dropped there. Someone saw Dutch's men gathering. Someone else heard they were asking about Bumpy's movements. By early February, Bumpy knew something was coming. He didn't panic. Didn't call for backup. Didn't ask Madame St. Clair to negotiate, because Bumpy understood what most people didn't. Running would doom Harlem. If he disappeared, Dutch would roll in unopposed. Take the numbers. Take everything. The neighborhood would collapse under Dutch's control. Fighting publicly would start a war. Bodies in the streets. Cops cracking down. Innocent people caught in the crossfire. Bumpy had one option. Face it, alone, win clean. End it before it started. If he ran Harlem, died. If he won Harlem, survived. So when the rumors pointed to Valentine's Day, when the whispers said Dutch's men were moving, Bumpy made his choice. He'd go alone. Not because he was reckless, because going alone meant control, meant keeping the violence contained, meant this stayed between him and Dutch without dragging Harlem into a bloodbath. February 14th, 1933, Valentine's Day. Bumpy Johnson walked toward the Cotton Club basement knowing exactly what waited for him. 12 killers, no witnesses, no way out. He walked in anyway. Bumpy Johnson didn't look for an escape route. He chose to walk straight into the place with no exits. The city was asleep when Dutch's men moved. Valentine's Day, 1933. Couples were home, restaurants closed, streets empty, the perfect night for murder. Dutch had chosen the date deliberately. Valentine's Day felt safe, romantic. Nobody expected violence on a night celebrating love. The irony wasn't lost on him. While the city dreamed of flowers and chocolates, he'd be sending Harlem a message written in blood. No witnesses, no suspicion, no one on guard. The timing was perfect. Dutch had spent weeks planning this, studied Bumpy's movements, tracked his routines, found the one place where he'd be vulnerable, the Cotton Club basement. A place Bumpy visited regularly, a place he trusted. Trust. Dutch knew was the best weapon. The Cotton Club basement wasn't the famous venue downtown where white audiences paid to watch black performers. That was the showroom, the tourist trap. This was the real Cotton Club, the after-hours spot on Lenox Avenue where Harlem's players came to drink, gamble, settle scores. Above ground music and laughter, below ground something darker. The basement was narrow, maybe 30 feet by 20. Low ceiling that made tall men duck. Crates of bootleg liquor stacked against the walls left over from Prohibition days. Poker tables folded in corners waiting for the next game. One light bulb hanging from a wire in the center swinging slightly whenever someone walked by. And one exit. A staircase leading up to the main floor. Narrow stairs. Steep. Single file only. The kind of staircase where you had to watch your footing or you'd tumble. The kind of space where numbers mattered, where 12 men could surround one, where every angle was covered, where escape was impossible. Dutch's killers had arrived hours earlier, slipped in through the back entrance while the club was still open, while music covered the sound of their footsteps, positioned themselves in the shadows, behind crates, in corners, near the stairs. Waited. They'd studied the layout, knew where to stand, where to aim, how to box Bumpy in the moment he descended those stairs. The plan was clean. Professional. Once Bumpy reached the bottom step, they'd reveal themselves, surround him, no speeches, no delays, just bullets. But they didn't know the room like Bumpy knew it. He'd played poker down here 100 times, lost money, won it back, shared drinks with men who were dead now, knew every crate by the labels on the side, every table by the chip stains on the felt, every corner where shadows gathered thick, knew which floorboards creaked, where the walls had gaps, how sound carried in the confined space, where you could move silent and where every step announced itself. That knowledge was his edge, silent, invisible, lethal. 4:32 in the morning, the hour when the city is deepest asleep, when even insomniacs finally surrender, when the only people awake are the ones who live in darkness. Bumpy descended the stairs, each step deliberate, slow, his hand on the rail, his eyes adjusting to the dim light below. He wasn't rushing toward his death. He was walking into a chess game where the board was already set, but he'd been studying the pieces long before his opponents arrived. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, that single bulb swinging gently. Scanned the room without moving his head, just his eyes, taking inventory, the hanging bulb, the staircase behind him, the crates offering cover, the tables creating angles, the shadows that were too still, too deliberately placed. He counted exits. 1. He counted shadows. 12. His face showed nothing, no fear, no surprise, no anger. Just calm. The kind of calm that comes from accepting what's about to happen and deciding you're ready. He knew they were there, had known before he walked in. The tip he'd received about Dutch's men planning a hit hadn't been wrong. It had been incomplete. They weren't planning to hit Madame St. Clair's counting house. They were planning to hit him. This wasn't a trap. This was a choice. And Bumpy Johnson had already decided how it would end. The shadows moved. Slow, deliberate, making a show of it. One by one, Dutch's killers stepped into the light. 12 men forming a semicircle around Bumpy, guns drawn, hammers cocked, barrels pointed at his chest, his head, his stomach. 12 angles of death. They didn't rush, didn't fire immediately. They wanted something first, something they'd come all this way to see. Fear. They wanted to see Bumpy's eyes go wide, wanted to hear his breath catch, wanted to hear him beg, wanted the satisfaction of watching a man realize he was about to die and knowing there was nothing he could do about it. That moment of power. That's what killers live for. Tommy, the executioner, Vento, stepped forward. Big man, thick shoulders, scarred knuckles from breaking jaws, eyes that had watched 16 men take their last breath. Some begged, some cried, some tried to fight. All died. He smiled, not a friendly smile. A smile that said, I've done this before and I'll do it again tomorrow. Dutch sends his regards. Bumpy stood there, hands at his sides, not reaching for a weapon, not raising them in surrender. Just hanging loose, relaxed, his face calm. Stone calm. He looked around the room slowly, studied each face, each gun, each man. Counted them again, deliberate, making sure they saw him counting. 12. He looked back at Tommy. That all he sent. Tommy's smile faded. Just a flicker. Just for a second. But it faded. Because see, that's what they didn't understand about Bumpy Johnson. He wasn't bluffing, wasn't posturing, wasn't trying to talk his way out or buy time or play mind games. Standing there outnumbered 12-1, asking if that was all they sent, that wasn't bravado. That was calculation. Another killer face hidden in shadow stepped closer. Gun steady. Voice hard. You got about 5 seconds to beg. Bumpy tilted his head slightly, like he was considering something, like he was deciding whether to answer at all. You're making a mistake. What mistake? Tommy raised his gun higher, aimed at Bumpy's forehead. You're about to be dead. The mistake, Bumpy said slowly, each word measured, is thinking I came here alone. 12 guns stayed trained on him, but something shifted in the room. The air changed, tension spiked different, hesitation, doubt. Tommy glanced at the stairs. Quick, instinctive, checking if someone was coming down. Nothing. Empty, just darkness above. He looked back at Bumpy. You're bluffing. Bumpy smiled for the first time. Small smile, almost sad, like he was disappointed they hadn't figured it out yet. Then shoot. Nobody shot, because violence has a rhythm. Every killer knows it. The build-up, the moment, the release. Like music. Like breathing. And right now, standing in that basement, Bumpy controlled the rhythm. He'd taken their moment, made them hesitate, made them think. And once you start thinking in the middle of a kill, you've already lost. Tommy's finger tightened on the trigger. Last chance. The other killers waited, watching Tommy, watching Bumpy, waiting for someone to make the first move. Nobody wanted to fire first, because firing first meant commitment, meant crossing a line that turned this from intimidation into murder, turned this from control into chaos. And despite everything Dutch had told them, despite the guns in their hands, despite being 12 against 1, they felt something they hadn't expected. Doubt. Bumpy's eyes moved from man to man, slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing faces, like he was deciding which one would die first, which one second, which one last. One of the killers in the back shifted his weight. Nervous, his gun wavered, just slightly, just enough. Another one glanced at the man beside him, looking for reassurance, looking for confirmation that this was still going according to plan. The psychological balance was tipping. 12 men with guns, and somehow the unarmed man in the center was making them doubt themselves, making them question. "You really think you're walking out of here?" Tommy asked, but his voice had changed, less certain, less confident. Bumpy didn't answer immediately. Let the silence stretch. Let it grow heavy. Let them sit in their uncertainty. Then quietly, almost gentle, "One of us is." That's when he moved. Not toward the guns, not toward the stairs, not trying to rush them or tackle them or make some desperate last stand. Toward the light. One punch. Fast. Precise. Years of street fights compressed into one perfect strike. The hanging bulb shattered. Glass exploded. The filament died. Darkness swallowed the room. Complete. Total. Blinding. Then chaos. The first shots came wild, panicked, fingers pulling triggers on reflex, muzzle flashes lighting the dark for half seconds, bright. Then gone. Leaving spots in your vision, making the darkness darker, men shooting at sounds, at movement, at shadows, at nothing. "Hold your fire," Tommy screaming over the gunshots. "Hold your fire." But fear doesn't listen to orders. Fear doesn't follow commands. Fear just reacts. In that darkness, Bumpy became something else. Not a man. A shadow. A ghost. Something that moved through the space like water through cracks. He moved through the room like he'd been born in it, like he'd spent his whole life preparing for this exact moment. Every poker game, every drink, every conversation in this basement had been training. Dutch's killers didn't know the space, didn't know where the crates were, where the tables stood, where the walls began and the open floor ended. They stumbled, crashed into furniture, into each other. They fired, hit wood, hit concrete, hit each other. Bumpy didn't waste bullets. He didn't need them. He used his hands, used their confusion, used their panic. A scream in the dark. Short. Cut off. A body hitting the floor hard. Another gunshot. Another scream. This one longer. Pain and shock mixed together. The sound of bone breaking. Unmistakable. A gun clattering away across the floor. "The stairs," Tommy yelling, trying to rally them, trying to restore order. "Get to the stairs." But Bumpy was already there, had moved the moment the light died, positioned himself between them and the only exit. The violence lasted 3 minutes. 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. 3 minutes where every sound was death and every silence was worse. A killer swung his gun blindly, heavy steel weapon used as a club, connected with something, heard a grunt, realized too late it was his own partner, felt return blow that dropped him. Another fired at movement, saw a shape, pulled the trigger, heard a scream, recognized the voice. His partner. Down. Bumpy moved through them like smoke, used their panic, used their confusion, used the fact that they were killing each other trying to kill him. A grunt. A gasp. A body slumping against the wall sliding down. Tommy tried to rally them. Together, stay together. But there was no together in the dark. Just 12 separate men fighting ghosts. Fighting fear. Fighting the realization that they'd walked into something they didn't understand. The sound of something heavy hitting the wall. A wet cough. Then silence from that direction. Another shot. Another scream. Fainter now. Weaker. Gradually, the sounds decreased. One by one, the killers went down. Not all dead, but all broken. All finished. All out of the fight. The basement went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Not the quiet of rest. The quiet after an earthquake. The quiet after a storm. The quiet that follows violence and leaves you wondering if it's really over or just pausing. Heavy breathing. Somebody whimpering. Somebody else praying. The smell of gunpowder thick in the air. The smell of blood. The smell of fear. Then footsteps on the stairs above. Someone opening the door. Someone who'd heard the shots and waited until the silence before investigating. Light spilling down into the basement like water, like dawn breaking, revealing what the darkness had hidden. The scene it revealed was carnage. 11 bodies on the floor, scattered, sprawled, some unconscious heads at wrong angles, some groaning, clutching wounds, some staring at nothing, minds gone somewhere else. Broken bones, gunshot wounds from friendly fire, blood pooling on concrete reflecting the light from above, and one man sitting against the wall back pressed to the crates, hyperventilating, eyes wide. Gun still in his shaking hand, forgotten useless now. Marty. Ice Pick Delaney, the only one still conscious. Bumpy was gone, vanished like smoke, like he'd never been there at all. Marty looked around at his crew. Tommy, unconscious, face down in blood. Vento bleeding from the stomach, not moving. The others scattered across the floor like broken toys. Like children who'd played too rough and paid the price. 12 killers had walked down those stairs hours ago. Confident, professional, ready. One was still awake. Barely. Marty tried to stand. Couldn't. Ribs broken, maybe internal bleeding, maybe worse. Pain shooting through his chest with every breath. He crawled instead, inch by inch, across the basement floor, over bodies, through blood. Past men he'd worked with for years, past friends, past people who'd never wake up the same. 20 minutes to reach the stairs. Every movement agony, every breath fire. He pulled himself up, step by step, gripped the rail so hard his knuckles went white. Emerged into the main floor as dawn light started creeping through the windows. The Cotton Club was empty. Everyone had run when they heard the gunshots. Nobody stuck around. Nobody wanted to be a witness. Smart. Marty stumbled outside. Cold air hit his face. February morning. Freezing. He flagged down a cab with blood-soaked money, hand shaking as he held up the bills. Bronx, he gasped. Arthur Avenue. The driver saw the blood, saw Marty's face, saw the desperation. Didn't ask questions, just drove. Fast. Across the street in an alley between buildings, Bumpy Johnson stood in shadow. Watching, making sure his message left the building, making sure one survived to tell the story. He could have killed all 12. Could have ended it clean. Could have made sure no one walked out of that basement. But that would have started a war. Bodies mean revenge. Revenge means escalation. Escalation means more bodies. Means Harlem burning. Means innocent people caught in crossfire. Instead, he'd humiliated them. Broken them. Shattered their confidence. Let one live. Because one survivor could deliver a message better than 12 corpses. Bumpy understood strategy. Violence wasn't the goal. Violence was just a tool. Control was the goal. Respect was the goal. Kill them all. Dutch sends 50 more, sends 100, sends an army, turns it into a war nobody wins. Break them, Let one crawl back with the story. Dutch thinks twice. Dutch recalculates. Dutch understands the cost. Marty sat in that cab, bleeding, shaking, replaying what happened in his mind, trying to piece it together. 12 professional killers, experienced, trained, armed, one man, unarmed, outnumbered, and somehow they'd lost. Not just lost. Been destroyed. Been dismantled. Been made to look like amateurs. He reached into his jacket, felt something that hadn't been there before, found what Bumpy had placed there during the chaos, during the darkness, during those 3 minutes of hell. A playing card. Ace of spades. Covered in blood. Still wet, Marty stared at it, hand trembling. And he realized something that made his blood run colder than it already was. Bumpy had gotten close enough during the fight to plant this on him, close enough to touch him, close enough to reach into his jacket, close enough to kill him, had chosen not to. That was the real message. Not the card. Not the blood. The choice. I could have ended you. I was close enough. I had the opportunity. I let you live. Now carry this back to your boss. One man walked out of that basement, and the fear that followed him out would reach all the way to the Bronx. The cab arrived at Arthur Avenue just after 8 in the morning. Dutch Schultz was eating breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee, reading the newspaper like it was any other Tuesday. His social club was quiet. A few lieutenants playing cards in the corner, accountants going over numbers. Business as usual. Dutch expected good news today, expected a phone call saying Bumpy Johnson was dead, expected to start moving into Harlem by noon. Instead, the door opened and Marty stumbled in, covered in blood, face pale, eyes hollow. Moving like every step might be his last. The room went silent. Cards stopped mid-deal. Conversations died. Everyone turned. Dutch looked up from his newspaper. Saw Marty. His face didn't change. Didn't show surprise or concern. Just watched. Calculated. He put down his coffee. Slow. Deliberate. Where are the others? Marty couldn't speak at first. His throat was dry. His chest hurt. Every breath was broken glass. He just shook his head. Dutch stood up. Slow. The kind of slow that's more dangerous than fast. Where are my men? Dead, Marty finally whispered. All of them. The room stayed silent. Nobody moved. Dutch's lieutenants watched their boss. Watched for the explosion. For the rage. For Dutch to flip the table and start screaming orders to burn Harlem to the ground. It didn't come. Dutch just stared at Marty. Processing. He killed all of them. He let me live, Marty said, and his voice cracked. To give you a message. The entire room waited. Dutch's bodyguards shifted. His accountant stopped breathing. Everyone understood this moment mattered. What message? Marty reached into his jacket, moving careful. Moving slow so nobody thought he was reaching for a weapon. Dutch's men tensed anyway, hands moving toward guns. Marty pulled out the playing card, the ace of spades, still wet with blood. Placed it on the table in front of Dutch. Dutch stared at it, didn't touch it, just looked. He said to tell you, Marty's voice barely above a whisper, Harlem's not for sale, and if you send more men, send more cards. He's collecting a deck. Nobody spoke. The card sat there between them, blood-soaked. Damning. A symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Dutch Schultz stared at that card for a long time. His men waited for the order, waited for Dutch to unleash hell, to send 50 men, to send 100, to burn Harlem to the ground and salt the earth. Instead, Dutch picked up the card, studied it, turned it over in his fingers. Then he did something nobody expected. He smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a smile of victory. A smile of resignation. A smile of recognition. He's got balls, Dutch said quietly. I'll give him that. One of his lieutenants stepped forward. Boss, we can't let this. Dutch held up his hand. Silence. "You know what it costs to go to war with someone who's not afraid to die?" Dutch asked. His voice was calm. Too calm. "Someone who's smarter than you. Someone who has an entire neighborhood behind him." He looked around the room, at his men, at the people who'd followed him for years, who'd made money with him, who'd survived because Dutch knew when to fight and when to walk away. "It costs everything," Dutch said. "And for what numbers money? There's easier money." He dropped the card in the ashtray, pulled out a match, lit it. Watched the ace of spades catch fire, watched it curl and blacken and turn to ash. "We're done in Harlem. Let Bumpy Johnson have it." The decision shocked everyone. Dutch Schultz, the man who'd gone to war with Lucky Luciano, who'd killed his own partners over disrespect, who never ever backed down, who built an empire on the principle that you never show weakness, backed down. His lieutenant tried again. "Boss, if word gets out that word will get out that we chose our battles smart." Dutch interrupted. "Word will get out that we don't waste men on territory that's not worth the cost. That's not weakness. That's strategy." But everyone in that room knew the truth. Dutch had met someone he couldn't break. Someone who understood power better than he did. Someone who'd proven that 12 guns didn't matter against one man who owned his ground. Dutch sat back down, picked up his newspaper. "Get Marty to a doctor. Clean this mess up. We're done here." The meeting was over. Harlem was over. Bumpy Johnson never made an announcement, never called a meeting, never stood on a corner and declared victory. That wasn't his way. He went back to work, collected numbers, protected Madame St. Clair's operations, walked the streets like nothing had happened. But everyone knew. Word traveled fast. 12 of Dutch's best men went into the Cotton Club basement. One crawled out. Dutch Schultz, the most feared mobster in New York, had backed down. Bumpy had won without starting a war, had protected Harlem without turning it into a battlefield, had proven that intelligence beats violence, that strategy beats numbers, that knowing your ground matters more than who has more guns. He'd done it by understanding what Dutch Schultz never could. Harlem wasn't just territory. It was home. It was family. And people fight different when they're protecting home. Bumpy didn't need to prove he was the toughest. He'd already proven he was the smartest. And in the long run, smart beats tough every time. He protected Harlem for the next 35 years. Not with indiscriminate violence, not with fear. With discipline, with loyalty. With a code that said you don't hurt innocent people. You don't destroy your own neighborhood. You protect what's yours. That ace of spades, the one Dutch burned Bumpy, kept another copy. Framed it. Hung it in his office where he could see it every day. A reminder. Respect isn't given. It's taken. But more than that. A reminder that violence is a tool, not a solution. That power comes from understanding people. From knowing when to fight and when to let one man walk away with a message. February 14th, 1933. Valentine's Day. 12 men walked into a basement. One walked out. And Harlem was never the same. Dutch Schultz never sent another man to Harlem. Never spoke Bumpy Johnson's name again. Moved his operations elsewhere. Found easier targets. Died 3 years later in a restaurant shot by rivals who didn't respect him the way Bumpy had earned respect. Bumpy Johnson became a legend. The man who faced 12 killers and won. The man who made Dutch Schultz back down. The man who proved that Harlem couldn't be bought, couldn't be taken, couldn't be broken. But the real story, the one that mattered, wasn't about the fight. It was about what came after. The 35 years of peace. The neighborhood that stayed protected. The people who lived their lives because one man understood that winning doesn't mean killing everyone. It means knowing what you're fighting for and being willing to die for it. Harlem never changed hands. And the legend that started in a basement on Valentine's Day 1933 lived long after Bumpy Johnson was gone.